The astrology of November 2025 is a big one, my friends. A month of deep reviews, retrogrades, Mars back in a fire sign, and lunations that ask us questions about growth, balance, and desire. Now, many of you know that my monthlies are pretty in depth. I usually start my monthlies always saying that, hey, we are not going to talk about every little thing in detail, but then lo and behold, I always find myself rambling a little too much. But the idea is for the monthlies, my friends, and for those who are new, welcome. But the idea for the monthlies always is to try to skim the surface so we don't go too far deep, because I need to save all of the pages. I have well over 20 pages of notes for all of these transits, and I really need to save that juicy material and those downloads for those separate videos that come down the line in the month. But we have 11 transits to talk about today. Some we're going to skim the surface very briefly, and then some we're going to dive in, of course, more deeply, because as usual, the lunations are very powerful in my work. You know, I like to get into the nitty gritty with the decans and the tarot card correspondences with those decans. And for those of you who are new to decans, I will explain exactly what that is, subdivisions of the zodiac. And so lunations are always something massive that we have to talk about in my monthlies, and just generally speaking. And then we have Mars going into a fire sign again. We have Venus going into Scorpio. We have Uranus going back into Taurus. We have a Mercury retrograde, which is going to dominate much of this month. And I would say retrogrades are the flavor of this month. So anyone who thought there might be a lot of progress involving world stage stuff, or I don't want to say our own life, because I know a lot of us are making a lot of progress in our life, but I think that there's a moment that we're all going to be faced with this month as we get into December actually as well, where reflecting, reviewing, and even when it comes to the new moon in Scorpio, there's going to be an emphasis on reviewing and reflecting something very, very big, because believe it or not, my friends, we have a 28-degree Scorpio new moon, and that will actually make a conjunction with Mercury retrograde when Mercury re-enters Scorpio towards the end of the month. That new moon in Scorpio is happening on November 19th and 20th. But then we also have Jupiter retrograde. Jupiter will turn retrograde. And then we have, of course, a Taurus full moon. I don't know if I mentioned that in the beginning of the month. And the sun enters Sagittarius. We have a Venus-Mercury conjunction, Venus-Mercury retrograde conjunction at the end of the month. And then way at the end of the month, the last day of November, we have Venus at 29 degrees Scorpio preparing to enter Sagittarius, which will happen December 1st. Now, we're not going to necessarily talk about that transit. That's an example of a transit we're not going to dive deep into, but I just want you all to be aware of what's happening throughout the month, piece by piece. Now, I'm actually feeling slightly under the weather. I mean, I can't tell if I'm actually on the verge of getting a cold or something. So if I sound a little nasally or sniffle more than usual, please just bear with me, my friends. And there's a part of me that's like, Joe, please don't talk for 45 minutes, even though your audience loves when you talk forever. So if for any reason I really skim, I don't want to say really skim or fly through, but if I don't seem like I'm as passionate or diving deep as I would like to, just please bear with me, my friends, and stick with me throughout the course of the month, where we will, of course, dive deeper, like I say. Or like I just said before. So, I mean, I feel pretty good right now, though, all things considered. And you know me, I just want to be as chill as I can with you guys. I want to muse and reflect and try to bring through as much download as I can. And I'm not saying download in a new agey way, even though it's kind of a new agey term. But I do feel like downloads are just something we all experience, right? These insights. And I love doing these monthlies, and I love preparing for them, and I love the insights I gain when I do them. And in real time, while I'm recording this video, I mean, I say things I never know, I never planned for, So that being said, let me just run down all 11 transits date by date first, without explaining too much of them, and then I'm going to dive deeper into the actual transits I would like to talk about. So get your notepad out, or just look at the screen when I show the charts. November 4th, Mars enters Sagittarius, goes opposite Uranus in Gemini, or Uranus retrograde in Gemini, okay? This is pretty intense. Uranus will be at 0 degrees, preparing to retrograde back into Taurus. Mars enters Sagittarius, a fire sign. Anytime Mars enters a fire sign, something very loud happens on the world stage. I don't want to say necessarily around conflict or war or violence, but Mars being the god of war, in Sagittarius, I mean, we can definitely expect some fiery themes, but I think this is going to be maybe more involving something to do with just a radical burst of truth speaking, of truth revelations of some kind. And the Uranus and Gemini story, again, we have to see how that might play out on the world stage, of course, and I'll probably get into that a little bit, maybe. Yeah, and then Mars will immediately sextile Pluto in Aquarius as well, November 4th. Now, November 5th, full moon in Taurus at 13 degrees. This is falling in the second decan. This is a moon-ruled decan, and I'll save the tarot card correspondence for later so you guys can, maybe have a little cliffhanger here. But yeah, there is a pretty beautiful tarot correspondence for this full moon, and I love that it's falling in a moon ruled decan as well, because as we all know, the moon is exalted in Taurus. So Taurus full moons are always a little extra special, in my opinion. That's the beautiful thing about having an exalted lunation, is that I feel most of the time they are positive in nature, even though the first decan of Taurus is a little bit harsher than the other ones. And the third decan of Taurus actually is, I don't want to say is not that great of a decan, but it's a little bit more, it shows a little bit more hardship, the third decan of Taurus. And I explain all of the decans, by the way, in my upcoming course, which I'll maybe make a little bit of a plug actually towards the end of this video on how you guys can start signing up for that course or learning more about it. But yeah, that middle decan of Taurus ruled by the moon is a beautiful decan. It's a moon ruled decan, and it's actually a very positive and beautiful tarot card correspondence. So we'll talk about that. And Mars is still opposite Uranus retrograde at this point. So the Mars-Uranus opposition might play into the flavor of what is revealed potentially involving Taurian themes. And on the world stage, we can reflect potentially on some of that as well, and how the Taurus energy mixed in with the Uranus energy right before it's about to retrograde back into Taurus, how that could maybe give us some clues on, I don't know, maybe some stuff that might reveal itself on the world stage involving the past 8 or so years when Uranus has been transiting in Taurus. But in our life, guys, I mean, listen, reveals in the Taurus whole sign house part of your birth chart, and we are dealing with, again, whatever the Mars opposite to Uranus in Gemini, whatever stories have been playing out in the Sagittarius part of your life recently, even though we haven't talked about Sagittarius in a minute, but also just what's been going on in Gemini for you. So the Sagittarius part of your life wants to have a conversation with the Gemini part of your life, and Mars wants to sharply bring you some insight and truth and philosophical potentially ideals to hit your consciousness. Maybe a new belief system triggers in your mind, in your heart. So that's something maybe we can look forward to. Now, November 7th, Venus enters Scorpio, squares Pluto in Aquarius. I might not talk about that as much today. It just really depends, but that's something we will talk about on a later date. Venus going into the underworld, right, in exile. She rules Taurus. She's going to be transiting in Scorpio. Venus in Scorpio is quite the energy, can be very promiscuous, can be very harmonious in a way where we are increasing desires in a different way than maybe we usually approach desire. But again, the desire element that can maybe breed transformation could be of the flavor there. Now, November 8th, Uranus retrograde re-enters Taurus. This is a big one. Sextiles Neptune retrograde and Saturn retrograde in Pisces. Mercury will be at its station degree at 6 degrees. So Mercury will station retrograde just a few days later. November 10th, that is my next transit here on the list. Mercury goes retrograde at 6 degrees Sagittarius. The pre-shadow began October 20th in Scorpio, and the retrograde will end November 29th, 30th, the very end of the month. And then the post shadow, the integration phase for it to get back to 6 degrees Sagittarius, will be December 16th. So we are in a retrograde zone for a long time. Okay. And the Sagittarius, those early degrees of Sagittarius into the late degrees of Scorpio is where the Mercury story will be wanting to review something for you. So if you have any significant placements in the early degrees of Sagittarius and the late degrees of Scorpio, there's definitely going to be some kind of a reflection, a review. There could be some communicative or mental blocks around some stuff. For me, Mercury retrogrades are always about making decisions, guys. So there's always like this, in between two signs, it's really interesting when you examine two different parts of your life in the whole sign house system, where you see maybe how that story blends together, so that's really important to note, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that, of course, in this video, but also in the next couple of weeks. Now, the next day, okay, we have Jupiter go retrograde at 25 degrees. This is definitely a transit we will make an entire other video on, but this is a transit we will talk more about today. Jupiter, the planet of truth, wisdom, abundance, growth, okay, spirituality to a degree, just our beliefs, our faith systems. Jupiter is the guru, okay? So Jupiter's always trying to expand us and grow us and provide that truth we need, whether we like it or not. So when it goes retrograde for months, we are usually dealing with the reviews and the reflections of a lot of what Jupiter has been trying to grow and expand since it entered Cancer. So that's coming on November 11th. Now, November 12th, Mercury retrograde and Mars have a conjunction at 6 degrees Sagittarius. So literally, while Mercury is still stationed or still retrograde at its station degree at 6 degrees Sag, Mars is going to approach it. And there's going to be a kaboomski, whatever that means. And we are going to have to, again, wait and see what that all means. But Mars is a planet of action, assertiveness, initiation. Yes, violence and rage and aggression. So, I mean, we've been dealing with this Mars-Mercury energy through the second half of October, right? I mean, pretty much most of October, right? I think once Mercury got into Scorpio, and that Mercury moves a lot faster than Mars, I mean, they started dancing together and clashing in a big way since mid-October, really. And as we got into late October, or depending on when you're watching this, I mean, I'm releasing this still in late October, Mercury and Mars are very much conjunct in the late degrees of Scorpio and offering grand water trines as well right now. So when they have this conjunction in Sagittarius, this is going to be something interesting. And there's no way for me to really pinpoint specifics, but again, we're dealing with fire sign energy, and we're dealing with a Mercury retrograde here. Now, on November 19th, we are going to have a new moon in Scorpio at 28 degrees. This new moon will have a conjunction with Mercury retrograde at 28 degrees. So Mercury will retrograde back into Scorpio, and this new moon will, birth something in that retrograde story in those last degrees of Scorpio. And once again, this is a new moon. This is another lunation, a new moon lunation specifically, that is happening at the late degrees of a zodiac sign. So again, we're in that anaretic degree zone where endings and the culmination, that threshold of whatever karma, that zodiac sign, that house topic theme of life, that whole sign house has meant for you. So these new moons at the very late degrees of zodiac signs in our life are symbolic for these endings and birthing simultaneously. So I've been saying for weeks now that I'm feeling like a lot of these new moons happening at the late degrees of signs are kind of like mini eclipses. Like there's like these endings and beginnings that are really just sort of happening simultaneously, and it seems like every single theme of life in order. Like last month it was Libra, the month before that it was the Virgo solar eclipse, and now we're having this Scorpio new moon in the late degrees of Scorpio. And it seems like there's all these themes of our lives that are just ending and birthing something new in preparation for all of the outer planets, in my opinion, for next year once they lock into their new signs. Uranus and Gemini, Neptune and Saturn in Aries, for the show to really begin, the new future of our lives and of the future of the world to really start changing in the way that we've been anticipating, have been so curious about, and anticipating. I think I just said that before, but again, we've been in this liminal space, my friends. The old world is dying. Our old worlds are dying. New ones are trying to be born. And for those of you who always say to me in the comments that nothing has changed for years and years and years and years, these are because you probably have either one, been fated with some like karma that you need to resolve. And this is why knowing astrology is so important, and getting remediation sessions or astrology sessions or whatever you need to do. Learn astrology yourself so you can like understand where your challenges are in your chart, because life will not get better unless you face the challenges and the weaknesses in your chart, the mistakes you might have made, the things that you still need to work through. Okay. None of us are safe from trauma and shadow in this life. So it's just who is finding out what those shadows are and who is doing the work sooner than later. Okay. And that's really what it comes down to. So yeah, my friends, and then November 22nd, the sun enters Sagittarius. November 25th, Venus conjuncts Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. And then at the end of the month, we're going to have a Venus entrance into Scorpio, a Venus going into Sagittarius from November 30th into December 1st. So those last 3 transits there, I'm probably not going to talk about. They're pretty self-explanatory, and I'll probably touch on all of those during the new moon in Scorpio video I make down the line. So that all being said, my friends, I don't want to waste any more time. I want to immediately jump into talking about Mars entering Sag real quick, the full moon in Taurus, and then sort of just go through some of the other transits I said before, and in more detail. But again, really not trying my best to not make this video an hour long, even though you guys would love that. But honestly, I'm just, I'm feeling just a little groggy today. I really am. I'm going to be honest with you, but we'll see. We'll see how far and deep we can get in this video. But before I continue, my friends, I would like to just say that if you're enjoying this video thus far and you would like to support my work or the channel here, it would mean the world to me if you can consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video. All that stuff really helps my work get shared more on YouTube, and yeah, I mean, it's always beautiful to have more of this soul family, this astro soul family, if you will, continue to grow. And yeah, my friends, I have openings up for November and December now for readings. If you guys would like to explore my website to book with me, links down below. And I'm not sure if my upcoming mini course on the decans and minor arcana, I have a mini course coming, my friends. It might be actually available right now for pre-sale if you would like, at a very discounted price. So I may have a link below. So go check that out, because I'm not sure if I'm going to link that below just yet. But if you would like to check out the description box to see if I do have a link down there, maybe consider tapping into the pre-sale for that. And there should be a bunch of information explaining what the course is all about. It is a self-paced course, and it is literally called 36 Mysteries Intro to the Decans and Minor Arcana. We get into the history of the Decans. We literally go through every single Decan and talk about their magical uses. We talk about the planetary rulerships. We talk about how they are used in astrology. And of course, the Golden Dawn Hermetic Order assigned the Minor Arcana cards to every Decan, and we literally explore all of them. So I really do hope you can consider taking that class. And there will be accompanying live streams as well with that course throughout the duration. So when a course actually is dropped and launched, we will have live streams throughout for everybody who purchased the class and signed up. So yeah, my friends, that's it for my little announcements. And yeah, let's dive right back into the video. All right, my friends. Well, on November 4th, we are going to have Mars enter Sagittarius, going opposite Uranus in Gemini, and sextile Pluto in Aquarius. Mars at 0 degrees can be a very loud transit, no matter where it is. So we can expect a fiery entrance, and we can expect definitely something to become disrupted and revealed and potentially just really shown in our face in a big way. So we really have to understand that this is possibly a theme of when courage meets disruption, and how are we going to break through whatever that Sagittarius theme is in our life, and of course the Uranus and Gemini stories. Now, Uranus opposite this Mars stuff, I mean, I think liberating truths can be found on the world stage. Sudden actions and insights might hit our consciousness that can provide to be really useful, maybe at a later date, maybe when Uranus gets back into Gemini in the spring into the summer of 2026, where Uranus will be locked into Gemini full time. Maybe this Mars going opposite right now will be useful, because you have to understand, once Mars gets into once we have Uranus locked into Gemini, anything that transits through Sagittarius from this point forward over the next 7.5 years will make communication oppositions. There will be more Mars and Sagittarius transits over the next 8 years. We will have a lot of other transits that fly through Sagittarius over the next 8 years. Anytime something cruises through Sagittarius, it is going to have to face off with Uranus. So again, I feel this can be very liberating. I feel something involving truth or philosophy. And when I say philosophy, I'm talking about our beliefs, something involving beliefs in that part of your life, something philosophical and revealing, and something maybe even action oriented, where you get an insight in that part of your life, the Sagittarius part of your life, where you want to take action on. But maybe that action will take time. Maybe that action is going to need to wait until Uranus gets back into Gemini next year. So that's something important to note. And then also this sextile to Pluto. Again, examine that Pluto in Aquarius story playing out, if you can tap deep enough into what that theme might be for you. And on the world stage, I think when we see a lot of anything hitting Pluto is going to trigger something big on the world stage. Anything being triggered, especially by Mars, to any of the outer planets right now, Neptune, or the outer planets that are really making these transitions into new world territories. These are big moments, okay? And even over the winter, when Mars gets into Aquarius, it is going to pop something off. And we're going to actually have an Aquarius eclipse right after Saturn and Neptune get back into Aries in late February. And Mars will be there. Mars will be in Aquarius during that time. Please do not tell me that something won't pop off. Something will happen in a really, really revolutionary sense. But in this transit specifically, we have to see. We have to wait and see what the Sagittarian energy in the collective will provide via a sextile. So that's actually something possibly good in nature, actually. So maybe for those who have been maybe disturbed by what's been going on in the world, this could be maybe a beautiful win, quote unquote, for any resistance-oriented, groups out there, or anybody who has been doing their best to fight against things going on in the world that maybe they find to be disruptive or corrupt, etc. Whatever that means to you, okay? Because we all know there's corruption everywhere. We all know that there's fuckery everywhere when it comes to the government and the world stuff. But yeah, in our own life, this could be also a supportive, moment for something that is communicating between the Sagittarius part of your life and the Aquarius part of your life. Now, November 5th, the full moon in Taurus, it will be happening at 13 degrees in the second decan of Taurus. This is a moon-ruled decan. The Six of Pentacles in the tarot rules this decan. So for me, when I think about the Six of Pentacles, I think about the imagery, because this is the imagery of the card, a figure giving coins to two people who are begging, who are longing for generosity of some kind. The sacred flow of giving and receiving is what I think this full moon will reveal to us. There could be an element of generosity, of abundance, of growth in some way. This could be the full moon we need in the world, in our own life, wherever Taurus is in your birth chart, where something generous or growth-oriented or potentially emotionally fulfilling and stable comes into your life, right? So we're having a lunation, a full moon revealing in a moon-ruled decan, in the moon-ruled decan of Taurus, which I really dive deep into in my mini course, by the way. And it's probably the most favorable and harmonious and blessed blessed decan of Taurus, okay? Because the first decan of Taurus and the third decan of Taurus are a little sketchy. You know, they're a little more challenging, if you ask me. And this middle decan is actually quite beautiful. Now, our new moon in Taurus that we had months back, that fell in the first decan of Taurus, which was ruled by the Five of Pentacles, which I'm not going to get into now, but we all know what the Five of Pentacles is. That's more about poverty, lack mindset. That's more about, perseverance through hard times potentially. And this is more about abundance and generosity and opening the gates of reciprocity. Now, this full moon rather, is also going to, again, I think bring elements of material security, embodiment, and pleasure. So these are just some Taurus themes that we all love and know. And I think this also, once again, will tie into what I just spoke about with Mars going opposite Uranus, because this is literally happening the day after the Mars opposition to Uranus. So we have to be, very careful on what's going on with the Mars-Uranus story and how that may even link together with the full moon revealing, because just because we have a full moon somewhere else in our chart does not mean that another massive transit will not play into those stories, because divine timing orchestrated this full moon to coincide with that transit as well. So yeah, my friends, we have to always look on the bright side, I think, when we have a Taurus lunation, because it's always possible for the Venusian qualities to really shine through our life, and for that harmony and pleasure and that growth-oriented energy to shine through. Even during the Taurus new moon with a Five of Pentacles ruled first decan, I think I gave some proper guidance there, that we have to really look on the bright side through struggle and try our best to persevere through the hardship and to find the solutions to the problems. So, but this time around, we're having a culmination from that new moon story, right? So this full moon is in a much more emotionally fulfilling and stable energy. So on the world stage, I don't even want to get into what that can be. I usually like to wait till lunations get closer and then observe the news cycle to kind of put together what something can mean. But for now, I think that's really all I have to say on that, guys. And and of course, I've been doing a lot more astrological magical discussion in my other solo videos. So when the time comes for me to record the full moon video, we will talk about some astrological magic things we can do, rituals and stuff like that. So that all being said, November 7th, Venus enters Scorpio and squares Pluto in Aquarius. This I will just say very briefly, because I do not want to harp on this for a monthly. But Venus enters Scorpio, which means the descent into the underworld, intimacy, passion, secrets, and magnetism might come to the surface. Pluto square amplifies relationship metamorphosis, intense creative projects, and collective re-examination of desire structures. So desire gets put under a microscope. The square to Pluto will somehow incorporate power dynamics involving desire. There could be something involving a woman that comes into focus potentially, or a feminine figure of some kind. So we might maybe hear some of that potentially. So some Venusian energy kind of hitting the world stage and causing a stir or some kind of a shift in power dynamics. But again, I don't want to harp on that, but descent into depth and power dynamics within intimacy and creative passions might reveal themselves to the world. Old desires may actually surface too. Older desires may resurface, and we may have to face them honestly rather than avoiding uncomfortable truths. We also should be careful with Venusian themes that could be toxic. So we have to always be careful with the scorpionic energy that could be darker and more shadow oriented. But again, maybe we'll talk more about Venus and Scorpio in another video or something like that. I'm sure I'll talk about it another time. But Venus and Scorpio is always an interesting transit, because we are dealing with Venus in exile. And that doesn't mean Venus doesn't love to express herself wherever she is or find the best way to do so. But Venus much prefers to be in Taurus, okay? But in Scorpio, we are looking at more of a provocative and seductive energy. And when I talk about the new moon in Scorpio, we'll talk a little bit more about Venus, actually, because the decan that the new moon in Scorpio will fall in is a Venus-ruled decan. So we'll get to that in just a bit. Now, November 8th, Uranus retrograde re-enters Taurus, sextile Saturn retrograde and Neptune retrograde in Pisces. This will be a whole dedicated video, of course, my friends, but key energies for this transit. Uranus retrograding back into Taurus equals final revolutionary sweep of the fixed Earth. So a final review, a final sudden revelation or insight or shakeup might come into the Taurus part of your life. Shaking old material structures, shaking things in your life potentially. Not in a bad way, because again, I feel once these outer planets have visited and have entered their new signs, the stories that will replay or resurface potentially while they go back into their old signs for a little bit, they're not going to tear us down. I think these are really internal experiences until they go direct, of course, right? And then that direct motion might churn up a little bit more of what we've been dealing with for the last 7.5 years in the Taurus part of your life specifically, okay? But again, I really have a theory that once outer planets enter a new sign and then retrograde back into their prior signs, that we're not dealing with the intensity of those stories that we experienced for all of those 8 years. Now, maybe some of you have a different philosophy on that. We will have to wait, of course, to see what actually goes down in our life. But on the world stage, this is going to be loud as F, okay? Because Uranus and Taurus really shook the core of material resources, the financial systems. We are talking about food resources, supply chain stuff. COVID was huge during Uranus and Taurus, okay? So we had like very powerful lessons around anything involving food supply chains. Climate change became kind of a bigger conversation. And I think this could be like the final liberation, some final events to pop off, to be reviewed. And also with my recent collaboration with S.J. Anderson a couple weeks back, if you would like to watch that, you should definitely go watch that. We brought up this retrograde stuff with outer planets going back into old signs. And we very much touched on Uranus going back into Taurus. And he said that when the last time this happened, we had the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So a lot of astrologers look to Uranus and Gemini as, oh my God, World War II happened the last time this happened here. Before that, it was the Civil War. And before that, it was the Revolutionary War. And this whole idea that Uranus triggers like war with America in a way has kind of been a theme. But really what triggered World War II and America's entrance was Pearl Harbor, and probably a few other things. But again, don't crucify me. I'm not a historian of World War II. I just know what I need to know. But and I probably should know more. But that's what SJ was saying. Like something, Uranus went back into Taurus, triggered a massive wartime event that really got America involved in World War II. So Uranus going back into Taurus, we kind of have this weird suspicion something might happen that will trigger some bigger response from America. So on the world stage, this is like a powerful moment that we all have to keep our eyes on, okay? But for most of us guys, this is a material awakening of some kind, a final liberation, right? Anything we need to clean up or decondition ourselves in, a course correction potentially in something that has been going on in that Taurus part of your life. Is there anything that you have regretted doing? Is there anything that suddenly entered your life where now you need to reassess, or whatever the case may be? It doesn't mean you're going to end things. It just means you may have a review around some shit. You may have to dive a little deeper into that part of your life, you know? So that being said, I will talk more about that at a later date. But yeah, let's move on to the next transit. So the next transit is Mercury stationing retrograde on November 10th at 6 degrees Sagittarius. Now, the pre-shadow for this Mercury retrograde began October 21st, like I said in the beginning of this video, at 20 degrees Scorpio. It will it will stay retrograde until November. It'll be retrograde from November 10th to the 30th. Okay, and that will station at 6 degrees. That's when the retrograde will start. And then the post shadow for this retrograde will end December 16th. So this really is a powerful moment for us to start gearing up for. I will definitely have a video up around this Mercury retrograde. I might put 2 videos up actually. So there might actually be one available now. I'm not sure if I recorded a Mercury retrograde like preparation video yet before this monthly, but if I did, definitely go check that out. If not, maybe I just didn't make it. So I don't know. But yeah, guys, this retrograde starts in Sagittarius, a Jupiter-ruled fire sign, of course, with belief systems, teachings, spiritual and ethical frameworks, storytelling, law, travel, higher learning, cultural perspectives, idealism, faith, expansion, growth, all those beautiful significations of Sagittarius. And how does that play into your life? How does that manifest in the whole sign house topic in your birth chart? Okay. How does the planet of communication, intellect, the mind, and how does this tie into some of that stuff? What did Mars going opposite Uranus trigger in Sagittarius for you? Maybe there's a story to be played out there. Maybe this is part of the review of those early degrees of Sagittarius. Okay. And Mars will have a conjunction with Mercury retrograde, which is something we'll probably talk about in 1 second. But Mars that just triggered something going opposite Uranus will have a conjunction with this Mercury retrograde. Okay. And then the new moon in Scorpio will have a conjunction with the new moon with this retrograde, or the new moon in Scorpio will have a conjunction with Mercury retrograde when Mercury gets back into Scorpio. So this Mercury retrograde is loaded with karma. It is loaded with reviews and reflections that we are going to have to face. Now, if you want to reflect on what was going on between October 20th and November 10th, that could be a good indicator. So journal about it, take note of what's going on in your life, take note of the Sagittarius part of your life, those early themes or what Sagittarius is all about for you. Take note of what's been going on in Scorpio. There's been a lot of transits happening in Scorpio recently. And this could be clues to maybe what Mercury is going to want to show you. So again, I think when we deal with the pre-shadow, we're dealing with, again, that Scorpio into Sagittarius energy. Deep digging is some focuses, uncovering emotional truths, forbidden thoughts, or taboo topics surface. So secrets might be a part of this. Secrets, things that have been buried deep within you, might be a part of this Mercury retrograde story. Okay. During the retrograde cycle itself, from 6 degrees Sag to 20 degrees back into Scorpio, rewriting narratives, unraveling dogma, revisiting buried truths to refine worldview, to refine your beliefs. So again, I think this element of deep emotional truth and secrets and beliefs in the Sagittarius part of our life and how we approach maybe our morals and our values and our ethics potentially, that could be in review. The mind and the mental aspect of who you are in your life experience will be experiencing the Scorpionic and that Sagittarius stuff, right? So that's kind of what I'm trying to get to. The pre-shadow is kind of unearthing and bringing to the surface maybe deeper things when it gets into Sagittarius before it goes retrograde, topics and more belief-oriented questions around trust and truth and philosophy and belief systems or whatever the case may be. Who knows, right? Only you know. And then when it goes retrograde back into Scorpio, this is kind of when we have to go within. And this is when the deeper truths and the deeper reveals must be faced, no matter how hard they are, And then the post-shadow phase, integrating what was learned. Of course, that is what the post-shadow is all about. Now, we don't really have to talk about that until December because the post-shadow doesn't begin until November 30th. But because it is the tail end of November when that occurs, of course, I need to slip that in there for you guys now. But integration is always the flavor with post-shadow. I like to call it the integration phase rather than just post-shadow. So it really is integrating a lot of what we learned and experienced. So in a way, the retrograde is not over until the post-shadow ends and until Mercury gets to 7 degrees Sagittarius, where it starts to accumulate and build new karma, new experiences, and and then we could talk more about that at a later date. So that all being said, let's move on to November 11th. Jupiter stations retrograde at 25 degrees Cancer. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, as we all know, and it is a cardinal water sign. So there is something very initiatory that has been birthing in all of our charts, something growth oriented in an emotional way in that Cancer part of your life. So again, where is Cancer? Where's that whole sign house theme of life for you? What has Jupiter been trying to expand and nourish and protect even? What have you been diving deeper into in an emotional sense, in a nurturing sense? What has been trying to speak truth to you there? Okay, Jupiter, think Sagittarius energy. Even think Pisces energy, spiritual depth, spiritual truth. Jupiter rules Pisces in traditional astrology. Okay, Jupiter, Sagittarius, Jupiter, Pisces energy. Think about that in the emotional depths and the emotional nurturing elements of Cancer. The archetype of Cancer. What does that mean for you? What has been trying to be taught to you? Okay. Jupiter retrograde is all about reconnecting to truth, reconnecting to belief, reconnecting to deeper wisdom. Okay. So this is really a huge part of what a Jupiter retrograde is. I know most retrogrades are about reviewings and re-examining and stuff like that, but Jupiter is deeper. It is spiritual. Okay, it is emotional. It is philosophical in nature. It is all about what we believe in. It is our truth. It is things that have been taught to us. It is intuitive downloads that resonate on the deepest spiritual level. Okay, yes, Neptune is a very spiritual planet too in modern astrology, but Jupiter was the OG spiritual planet. It is the planet of blessed wisdom. Okay, miracles, beliefs that can provide us with faith and just an undying and unwavering progression forward and growth in something in our life, So stationing retrograde intensifies Jupiter's presence in Cancer. Stations are when, the station retrograde is when the planet is the loudest. So again, November 11th might be a very loud day in the Cancer part of your life for this reflection and this re-examining and this review stuff. This reflection in the deepest of ways might hit you in a really powerful way. And I think this review will ask us questions about what have we been trying to nurture there in a spiritual sense? What have we been trying to nurture there in a more emotional sense? So what deep emotions have expanded? Because again, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, but there could be stuff going on in the Cancer part of your life that is deeply emotional, maybe even troubling for some of you. And Jupiter may have to rip that Band-Aid off to show you the truth of some shit so you can understand the totality of what must be done, the totality of the healing you might have to do. So a retrograde is a moment for us to get deeper and more thoughtful, maybe more intuitive on what we need to nourish ourselves in that part of our life. Okay? And by the end of this retrograde cycle, I'm sure we will have learned some deeper lessons. And this is why participating in astrological magic or planetary communication with transits is so important. And this is stuff I'm going to teach down the line, by the way, going to teach more deeply on astrological magic and how to communicate more efficiently with the planets. And this is nothing woo-woo, by the way. This is what mystics and astrologers used to do for thousands of years. So I think we need to become more harmonious and more interconnected with the planets and realize astrology lives through us. Okay, it's not just something out there in the sky. It is a living, breathing organism that is pulsing and needing our nourishment and connection. So Jupiter's retrograde is going to be powerful. And we'll talk more about that in another video. Now, I'm going to skim over the Mercury retrograde conjunct Mars transit here. But again, I think I spoke about it a little bit before in the Mercury retrograde segment, just a few moments ago. But again, that Mars opposite Uranus activation, maybe there's going to be something tied into the Mercury retrograde story involving that. So we have to just keep our eyes on what that can mean, but that's really just one gem of wisdom there. So again, maybe the Mercury retrograde is going to start unearthing truths right? So I think this Mercury retrograde is really going to unearth truth, unearth things that we need to examine and re-examine our belief systems around stuff. So again, that Mars opposite Uranus might have triggered some truth in your life, but not just your everyday, like, oh, here, look at another spiritual person talking about, look at your truth, guys, or embody your truth. Like, no, like there's some transits that pop off where I'm like, no, really look at what's what's revealing itself to you. Really look at what beliefs are being challenged, or something deeper within you that is asking for your acknowledgement and your complete and utter focus. So this Mars opposite Uranus activation, now meeting a Mercury retrograde moment, there could be a story there. There could be a story there. So we'll keep track of that and talk about that at a later date, I'm sure. Now, to close off this video, I think I'm going to end with the new moon in Scorpio, because the other transits that are happening later in the month are just the sun entering Sagittarius, Venus going into Sagittarius at the way end of the month, which is important, by the way. It is important because Venus will conjunct Mercury retrograde at some point before, Mercury flips back into Scorpio, just literally around that time. And I feel this new moon is really what we should close off on. And again, this will be a big video that I make towards the middle of November. So keep an eye out for that. But this new moon in Scorpio is happening November 19th and 20th. This is happening in the third decan of Scorpio. This decan is ruled by Venus, and the Seven of Cups in the minor arcana rules this decan. Now, the theme of this new moon: discernment between real vision and illusion. A new moon for birthing a new reality, re-examining our choices, banishing illusion, attracting desires, and making bold decisions. The Mercury retrograde will be conjunct this at 28 degrees. So this Mercury unearthing and digging deep, things that involve stuff that might have been buried within you in that Scorpio part of your life, things that have been waiting to be looked at more deeply, things that could involve illusions and desire, that is going to be part of the story, I believe. So again, the endings, because we're dealing with anaretic degree energy, 28, 29 degrees, okay, at the end of Scorpio for this new moon, and because we're dealing with the Seven of Cups in the tarot, and because we're dealing with Venus, which is really all about desire, and it's all about the attractiveness of life and the harmony of life. But in Scorpio, this can be provocative, this could be sexual, this can be toxic in a way, depending on where our desires are, depending where our blind spots are, okay? So again, the Mercury retrograde story is going to bring something to the surface. It is going to require a review and a reflection in a big way. So Scorpio generally is definitely about stuff that's hidden beneath the surface: intensity, power, transformation, intuition, okay? Jealousy, obsession, fear of betrayal, erotic longing, power-hungry themes. Now, I'm not saying that's part of this new moon, but in the Venus ruled decan, we are dealing with desire, and we are dealing with the illusions of things, but we are also dealing with the powerful nature of dreaming something into being, taking a new illusion, taking something that maybe we have been thinking about or fantasizing about and making something real of that, but also killing off and concluding something else in the Scorpio part of our life that needs to end, that needs to be examined and released in a really, really big way. Now, the Seven of Cups, I mean, I'm sure many of you know the tarot, but the Seven of Cups is the image of a figure before seven floating cups, each filled with alluring visions, jewels, a wreath, a dragon, and a veiled figure, and etc. There are a few others, of course, there. But again, this really is about the imaginal realm, the imagination, the desires that we have, fantasy, and how spirit can intermingle throughout our experience, and how there can also be a creativeness to this as well. In my decans course, I think when I got to this decan, when I started talking about the Venus ruled decan of Scorpio, the second decan, I said this could be a beautiful place for a moon or a sun sign to fall, or a chart ruler to fall in this decan. for people who are artists, but the type of artists that are provocative, that are not afraid to really get like morbid and, kind of grotesque, but also very erotic and provocative. People who really can push boundaries to offer a message of transformation, whatever that is. So again, we can really look at the Venus ruled decan of Scorpio as something that can be beautiful, creative, imaginary, and can birth something very, very beautiful and new there. So again, this new moon is all about birthing something and ending something in the process because of those anaretic degree energies, but also this can open the gate to new visions, okay? But discernment is needed, because we are dealing with Scorpio, which is required. Discernment is it's a part of what Scorpio nature is. Scorpios are brilliant at discerning bullshit and truth. And they usually go through stuff in their life that requires them to become that intuitive or perceptive. That is why many Scorpio risings were born in a very traumatic way or born into traumatic circumstances. This is why most Scorpio moons end up going through something very hard, because it makes their intuition and their inner life experience more susceptible to the nature of suffering and the nature of, emotional flows, and the darker things of life, and being impervious to that at some point, looking into the face of darkness and not being afraid. So this new moon will open the gate to visions and fantasy potentially. It might also reveal old fantasies and bullshit and things that are false, illusory, that we need to get rid of. This Mercury retrograde story is huge involving this new moon. So again, that is very much part of what I think this birthing will include. So this unearthing with the Mercury retrograde story will somehow manifest itself through the birthing, okay? And that will aid and assist the birthing. And then when Mercury goes direct again, when it gets back to that 28th degree, that'll be an interesting reflection. So really maybe take notes on that, where when Mercury goes direct and gets back to 28 degrees Scorpio, I don't have the date on the top of my head when that happens, but that would be the new moon activation degree. So maybe something the new moon seeds will also very slowly pop off. Something might grow, or your mind might get that aha moment when that direct motion comes back to that 28th degree. So that's something else I really wanted to mention to you guys. How important that is to already keep in our mind, because this Mercury retrograde and the Scorpio new moon are very much the flavor of this new moon. But also, again, that Venus ruled decan with the Seven of Cups energy. Okay, so, back in the day, the decans, all the decans, and I talk about this in my course, all of the decans have their own meanings around them and their own themes. And then the Golden Dawn Hermetic Order put these minor arcana, they infuse the magic of the tarot into the decans as well. So some of the tarot cards and some of the themes of the original planetary rulership aren't 100% like in sync as far as symbolism and meaning, but they do both complement each other always. And some of the cards actually very, very synchronistically link up perfectly as far as symbolism and messaging. But more than half of the time, there's always some kind of a complementary nature to them both. So sometimes we can see the card manifest more dominantly on the world stage or in your own life, or other times it could just be the fact that we're in a Venus ruled energy and a Venus ruled decan in a darker force such as Scorpio, So again, I think the discernment between illusion and reality. So let's keep that in mind. We need to be discerning during this new moon and really pay attention to what the Mercury retrograde offers, because that to me is really where the money shot is. That's where the truth is. That's where the medicine is. And again, this is why we really must know astrology and understand the symbolism, or seek out good astrologers or astrological teachers to help you understand this stuff, because this is how we can really shapeshift our life, navigate our life, remediate the challenges, and become better people, aligned with our mission to achieve our destiny in some way. So that's all for this video, my friends. I do hope you enjoyed, and look at the time. How long did I go? I don't even know how long I recorded for, but yeah, I do hope you enjoyed this video, my friends. And once again, please like, comment, and subscribe. Check out my description box for my offerings. Maybe that course, this Decans course that I keep blathering on about, there could be a pre-sale already available for that. It's a discounted price, so the prices will go up for what this course will cost. So yeah, consider maybe pre-buying it. And again, we're going to have live streams all through January into February. The course will drop January 4th or 5th. It's a Sunday. And then we're going to have live streams once a week for probably a month or so, just so we can talk about the course, we could talk about Decans, and we could talk about whatever you want. So whatever you want to talk to me about during the live stream stuff, we will dive into. And I can't wait for all of that. So, but yeah, check out the description box below, my friends. And yeah, that's all for this one.